I'm going to argue that the list of rights, according to the ECHR, omits one critical right, upon which I think everything else rests. It should be at the head of Article 10, entitled Expression. Article 10 provides the right to freedom of expression, subject to certain restrictions that are in accordance with law and necessary in a democratic society. As an aside, considering that most people, virtually everybody, has no idea about the sophistication and nature of democracy, that leaves the barn door wide open for creatures to escape and for horrors to replace them. Anyway, this supposed right includes the freedom to hold opinions, generous, and receive and impart information and ideas, but allows for restrictions for, and here's a short list, interests of national security. Well, who's to say what is national security and not? Territorial integrity or public safety, ditto. Prevention of disorder or crime. Again, it depends what law says is crime or what perverted justice system declares that. In the UK we have two-tier justice, which is blatantly obvious. Protection of health or morals. Well, again, morality is a big question mark in modern philosophy, and there are quite a few just dismiss it altogether. It's a very woolly area, again because of the failure of philosophy to take it seriously. Protection of the reputation of the rights of others. Well, that could be circular. And it depends on what you think the rights are. Preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence. Well, that's a bit tricky, isn't it? Possibly more palatable. And finally, maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. Well, in the present situation, the judiciary doesn't really have much authority and certainly is not partial to a great extent in the United Kingdom when it comes to certain types of criminal activity. And indeed, on the civil side, it's pretty ropey. So there we go, there's the list. It's a mess. And one of the major reasons why is because the entire list of human rights, the articles and then the protocols to follow, is based on pretty uncertain, opaque and at times rather odd views of the philosophy that's supposed to hold the structure up. In fact, there isn't really a coherent structure in terms of philosophy. The foundations they do exist, they're secret, and they certainly aren't in the remit or imagination of the ECHR. Sort of floating on a sort of strange view of liberalism, with a little dash of Napoleonic ideas in it, and of course no small amount of the beliefs and hopes which came from the United Kingdom, Britain, after the Second World War. So, what right is missing? Well, as you know, I'm particularly keen on taking contradiction and disagreement seriously and give it due respect, not least because the second and third paradoxes of reason depend upon respect for contradiction and also, in certain cases, acceptance that it needs to be the test of the law of non-contradiction needs to be suspended. That's the second and third paradoxes. The third one is particularly interesting because it's a paradox of reason, suggesting that to be reasonable, we must be unreasonable. And the process involves according meaning to the word contradiction. Because contradiction as a word in terms of the law of non-contradiction is self-destructive. It's circular. It's rather like a snake eating its tail. It's doomed to extinguish itself unless a human being thinks, oh, well, maybe we should suspend that self-destructive part of the word contradiction, and then we'll be able to use logic, understand it, and get on with reasoning. So, what is this right which I've been talking about? It's very similar and related to the ability to reason. It's more to do with society respecting reason, and to the extent in democracy to be able to enable due respect for the fact democracy acts as an engine for reason, enabling engagement with society, which itself is full of contradictions, incoherence, inconsistency, along with a huge amount of sense. It's a very interesting and strangely pervasive domain of reality with the different laws. So in the intersubjective, which is where society exists, it is quite possible to have inconsistent or incoherent entities in a way that would be logically and physically impossible in physical reality, and is partially so in humans, where when we consciously think of something, a contradiction is intolerable. But in our memory, by the second paradox of reason, where we're obliged to suspend the use of logic, because if we didn't and we tried to apply it for all the information and sensory perception, after about a quarter of a minute, maybe even less, a few seconds, our brains would freeze up on overload. It's physically and mentally impossible to apply logic, strict logic, on anything we perceive or information we receive, because for a start, when you're dealing with movement, that has a sort of reductio ad absurdum to it. You know, Achilles and the tortoise, or Zeno's arrow. And then, so change itself is something which demands a certain suspension of a law of non-contradiction. You just have to accept these things happen. Possibly the greatest non-logical word of them all is contradiction. It's a fantastically important word, because without understanding its meaning, we couldn't reason. In fact, I don't think we could think. We would be in a pretty bad way. So, the missing right, which should be at the head of Article 10, because it's so essential to humanity, to our consciousness, to our ability to exist, as opposed to being thoughtless, as some people call them, very nasty people, useless eaters, shades of 1930s Germany. Believe me, there are people around today who have that same view, and they're not all so-called right-wing. There's a lot on the left who think like that. And they often have, they'll adjust it a bit and call them useless thinkers, which is, in a way, just as lethal. So this right is the right to be wrong. And I suppose you could have a subsection, the right to be mistaken. It's very easy when involved in a heave-ho, an argument with someone, to probe, to find out a weak spot in their argument. And in the process, forget the fundamental principle when you're discussing anything, be it an argument or just trying to seek to find out more, is to seek the meaning. Many people, of course, will talk to someone, particularly ideologues, and they're into point scoring. And the ultimate is to detect an apparent or an actual contradiction. If you're going to do an Aunt Sally on someone, you manufacture that because you say, oh, so what you're saying is. And it's a very common trick. And it often carries audiences. And if it's said with particular intensity, combined with charisma, you can dismantle respect for someone who's got a point. And it's a very common trick. It's very low, base, sometimes cruel, and also elementally hypocritical. Because, as I mentioned in the previous post or two, even hypocrites can speak the truth. And as we're all hypocritical to a greater or lesser extent, dismissing someone or what someone says on the grounds that they're a hypocrite is, unless it's directly related to hypocrisy, is finding an excuse not to take the truth seriously, or at least an excuse not to seek the meaning and seek the truth. The people who taught me the most in my life are the people who've been, in one particular case, an academic from my university back in the late 70s, who was so angry with me in ethics in 1977, autumn 1977, that she refused to teach me. And another academic, a man called Raymond Plant, he might still be alive. He used to be the master of the college at St John's at Oxford, but he's going to be coming on now. It must be in his mid-80s. Had to take over and do it instead. And this person really, really, really disliked me. Our final parting, just before the end of the final lecture, she said, "We do not want to hear from people like you." When I was making an observation about how the events of the season resembled rather Plato's mating ceremonies, which they do. It's perverse. I certainly wasn't trying to make out that my background was wonderful or anything. My opinion of Plato is that he was a really very unpleasant philosopher. He was an establishment darling. He certainly didn't want to be a Socrates and have be accused of misleading the youth and insulting the gods. Hemlock was not for him. No, he was a philosopher that pushed eugenics, rule by philosopher kings, aka dictators, didn't like poetry very much, and was very keen on establishing a caste system for society. This philosopher is still taken very seriously. Most of the stuff that was sensible, I think, came from Socrates. But his Republic is really an authoritarian's playbook. It is clever, but not very sophisticated. Socrates was the last gasp of Minoan philosophy. The Minoans were a very different kettle of fish. They really thought that philosophy was to seek knowledge and truth about the foundations and nature of the world, the universe, and everything. Plato started cutting it down. He invented what I think is a useless distinction between subjective and objective. He certainly never got near the thought that existence covers them all, and the rules of existence only differ in the realms of physical reality as opposed to intersubjective reality and subjective reality And he certainly didn't follow through with the idea that the intersubjective reality depends upon subjective realities, depends upon physical reality. That's absolute. Our specific and brilliant nature of humanity is that we can combine all three in our heads, and they relate to one another. We enable the relationship between them by treating logic partially. That means to say that we permit the law of non-contradiction to be suspended or indeed ignored, depending upon which domain is to be thought of. So in the intersubjective, anything goes, contradiction, absurdity, whatever. In the subjective, in certain areas of our thought, the unconscious thought particularly, that same thing can happen. Conscious thought less so. It's arguable. I don't think it does. Some might argue one way or the other. And in physical reality, of course, the law of non-contradiction is absolute, with no exception. So that's seeing as a whole. These realities are not separate domains forever split off from each other. They're all intimately related. This is common sense. I mean, but the modern mind is still incapable of getting out of the solipsist nightmare. Oh, subjective, how can you ever be objective, blah, blah, blah. It's because they're fixated with logic, incapable of understanding that there are more than one method to our thinking. We're vastly more sophisticated. And the way we live and the way we see the world is proof of it. If people want to sort of bury themselves in, the ultimate denial of things around us, then that's their problem. They certainly shouldn't force it on us. So, the right to be wrong. If you hit ideology with that, it gets into dreadful tiffs, because ideology thinks it's perfect. So it's like sort of life by rule by the book. There used to be someone in the 1940s, a sort of stock character appear occasionally, some unhelpful bureaucrat or what have you, who would, rules is rules. And such people have a sort of pettifogging mentality. They're not naturally like that. Circumstances force them into that particular way of thinking. And their left field thought completely alien to them. Flexibility unknown. They just have a tramline life. Keep the nose clean, do what you're told to do, and go home. The Soviet Russia was very much like that. I had a friend who worked in a dairy in Romania, and they had one part where they actually dealt with the calves and so on and so forth. And she told me, she was a manager there, she told me that it was quite common if a cow was in labour and in danger of dying, spot on 5 o'clock, the people in the dairy would just go home. No one there. Oh, well, right is right. The animal dies in agony, the calf most likely dies, there's a lot of mess around. It's all very nasty. Now, an extreme, I have heard, that has been known to happen in hospitals also. Makes your blood run cold. So the right to be wrong. The right to be able to believe something which isn't necessarily so. Well, as none of us knows everything, and I've yet to see the person who's never made a mistake. That's a pretty fundamental right. Also, of course, learning from experience is critical. But in an ideological world, all these things are forbidden, because everything is already known. It's a very primitive belief. Socialism, communism, fascism, you can have lots more isms there too. And it also comes in the form of, it's a bad word, religiosism, theocratic mentality, same thing. They're all excuses not to listen, excuses to order, dominate, control, and strip agency from people to give it to pet abstractions, be it religious entities, be it proletariat, struggling masses, or in the case of particular extreme right, racial groups. Although on the left, that's certainly far from being foreign, as that bit in Capital, in the, I think it's a chapter in the Contradictions in the Formula for Capital, I think there's actually a subsection, about a capitalist being internally circumcised Jews. Yeah. And because ideology is so humorous, that's not a joke. It's deliberate. Because Marx was Jewish doesn't make it any better. I mean, I just like my own background, and whenever I have a pop at it, I do think twice. Because there is a lot of truth in honour thy father and thy mother. And if you start attacking them, in a way you're attacking yourself. It's uncomfortable. So, the right to be wrong is, I think, the most important right of all. Certainly way up there. But you won't find it in the ECHR. Because if you do, it causes real difficulty for ideologues and all those ists. Well, that's it for today. It's a lovely day. I'll just point the camera at the garden to give you an idea before I sign off. Really lovely. It's only a tiny part of the garden. I say tiny, it's about a quarter, something like that. And the bit you saw was where the train, because I'm in an old railway station, to trundle along going to Wales and towards Labster. But I'd ended up in a place like this is almost unbelievable. I consider myself one of the luckiest people on earth. Bye for now.